Hi, welcome to episode 37 of the American Tributaries podcast. We're here to break out of the bubbles we've all been living in these last few years. We're using modern technology to explore the various currents of people in our great country, kind of like a 21st century Lewis and Clark journey. I'm your host, Michael Whitten, and thank you for joining me in this exploration of America. If you enjoy the show, please be sure to spread the word about what we're doing and let your friends and family know on social media. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Ebenezer Akakpo, who lives in Maine and founded Akakpo Design Group, which, among other things, makes jewelry using patterns based on the ancient symbols called Adinkra from his native Ghana. And I learned about Ebenezer when I picked up one of his pieces of jewelry myself. So I'm showing here on the YouTube channel the bracelet that I picked up, which I love because it kind of felt very solid, but still kind of like understated. And obviously I love the symbols. In particular, this one was, I think, for hope, which I love being reminded of because I find the more that you look for hope, the more you find hope out there in the world. So Ebenezer, thanks so much for the bracelet, and thank you for joining me today. How are you doing? And could you share a bit of your
Well,
story?
well, thank you for having me. It's a cold evening here, but I'm doing well.
So
uh,
where are you in Maine exactly?
I'm currently in Portland, Maine, on Washington Avenue, 132 Washington Avenue. I have a pop-up shop that I'm running that features some of my products. I have things from or objects from jewelry to coasters, and then some apparel. One of what is what I'm wearing, um, with the patterns on the hand. Um, it's always tricky when I'm asked such a question that to speak about who I am or who, um, uh, just to talk about me.
Yeah.
um, growing up, growing up, I did not grow up with my biological parents. I grew up with my uncle, um, actually uncles. But the uncle that I lived with or grew up with for a longer period of time is who I'm going to talk more about. So um, he had his own family of about 3 or 4 kids, including some extended family members that also lived with him, including myself. We were about maybe 5 kids in the house. He was a school coordinator as well as the senior housemaster. And we lived in the campus called Accra Technical Training Center, which belongs to, I don't know if it belongs to, but I know it's sponsored by the Canadian government. It's an institution where it's more like a vocational technical space where they had everything ranging from television and radio repair, um, auto body and auto mechanics to carpentry, refrigeration, which is HVAC systems, to masonry. So that is where I grew up. And I think part of, even though I wasn't a student in the school, the mere fact of having the opportunity to be able to float around because of my uncle's status, to be able to float around in some of the classes without any question. I think somehow um, has helped to be who I am today. Um, on the side of my dad, we are 5 kids on my dad's side, and then um, 3 kids on my mom's side. Um, we we all grew up separately, but at one point we were all in the same space prior to leaving for Italy. And before I left for Italy, I knew I wanted to follow the steps of my dad, who was an architect. Um, so it's interesting how even though I didn't stay with him, I kind of had that interest in architecture. And then he one day he said, "No, well, we cannot all be architects, so I should go into jewelry making." But it wasn't a big surprise or a big change because I had experience from a secondary technical school, which is more like a high school system here in the US, but it's a combination of the sciences and the technicals. So you're able to find your path because you have the balance of either going a technical route or going into medicine. So I did maths, physics, chemistry, biology, um, English, and then in my case, I also studied geography, and then I did building drawing, woodwork, and because I was really interested in technical drawing, I kind of added the metal drawing as well. Just to give me that kind of broad scope. Um, and technically, I would say since then, it is something that I've continued to build on.
So how? So you said you moved from Ghana to Italy?
Yes, to,
So
to school.
okay. So how old were you when you moved from Ghana to Italy?
I was 20.
Okay.
I turned 21 in Italy. No, 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 no. Sorry, I was 21. I turned 22 in Italy, and I turned 23 in the US.
Okay. And was your plan to go to Italy for school and then end up in the U.S., or how did that all happen?
Well, US wasn't part of the plan, even though I would say it was kind of part of the plan, but it wasn't part of the plan. Um, I after high school, um, was enrolled as an apprentice in an apprentice program for a jewelry shop in Ghana to learn how to build, like to design. Not necessarily to design, but to make from scratch. So I was learning everything from taking the raw gold to downgrading from 24 karat or 23.9 or 23.6 to 18 karat or to 14 karat, and then melting it, adding other materials to it and melting the whole thing. And if you want to make a chain, you draw your own wire and you make the chain from scratch. That was the type of training that I got. Um, so in the process of that training, my dad also said um, it would be nice to have a foreign experience added to that. But before you go outside, it is also good to have the traditional experience. So the traditional experience is what I did as an apprentice jeweler for about 3 years. And then at the close of the trimester, that was when I was given the opportunity through my dad to go to Italy, especially Florence, where I think next to Florence is another city called Arezzo, where they have all this jewelry industry. And the plan was to go there and study um, the art of jewelry making, on the next level, and then come back home. But prior to leaving for Italy, I was also looking into schools in the US that offered jewelry making programs. And after doing my research, I found three schools. One of them was in Maine, the other two, one was in Indiana and Texas. And just like the system is set up, once you figure out which schools and what program you want to study, you set up an appointment with a student advisor who then will advise you based on the schools that you can attend, as well as financial aid or financial programs that you can get. And when I met with her, the first thing she said to me was, I think you should go to Maine. And I was like, why? She said, because if you go to Maine, your parents will be able to sleep at night. I had no idea what that meant, but it was when I got to Maine, I realized, okay, Maine is very peaceful, it's very laid back, it offers that type of flexibility and freedom to grow as an artist.
And had you ever been to the U.S. before that?
No.
So, what were your expectations?
Um, I didn't have any expectations because once again, I'm going to go back to my uncle, the one I grew up with. He, for a long time, did not travel out of the country, but then he had an opportunity through the school, through the Canadian sponsored school, to go to Canada for a program for about 6 months for training. And I remember, I was little at the time, but I remember when he came back, one of the professors or the instructors, who also happened to be a family friend, was asking him, "Well, you were in Saskatchewan. I heard it's very, very cold. So how were you able to cope?" And I remember that like vividly. He was like, "Well, the people living there are human beings just like me. All I had to do was do what they were doing, and that's how I survive. And with that in mind, anywhere I go, I do what the people that are already there doing." And that is what, so with that mindset, I feel like I can live anywhere. With that mindset, I didn't have any recommendation or doubt that I wasn't going to be able to make it here. The only drawback for me was the school. I thought my school was a pure traditional jewelry making school, just like it was in Italy. And it wasn't. It was more of an art school where I had to learn, um, I call it things at the time. I had to learn things that I didn't really care about, and those things were graphic design, um, figure drawings, uh, sculpture. I didn't really care about it. All I was thinking about is jewelry making. But it's after a few years that I began to understand the importance of understanding those things, because understanding the fundamentals of the things that I wasn't interested in actually started making sense for me to become. um I don't know if I'll say I'm a great artist, but for me to become who I am today, which I'm still building on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really interesting. And how long were you at that school for before
which
you set
school?
up on your own? At the school in Maine.
It's a 4 year program, but I,
Okay.
I got it. I think I did it in 3 years.
Okay. All right. And then, so then, how long before you once you graduated did you start making and selling your own jewelry? Had you already been doing that? What led you to where you are now?
No, I didn't. To your question, and the my journey is a little bit different. You know, going to Italy was fun, but I also had certain experiences that has made me who I am today. And I also had an opportunity to visit a few shows, not in Italy, but one of them was in Germany. And that actually had a profound impact on the way I thought about design, the way I thought as an artist, and the way I thought about how what I experienced at the time was going to revolutionize the way we do design in the future. And I'm talking this was like 1998, 1990, yeah, 1997, 98 thereabout. Um, I was there's a show in Munich, Germany called In Argenta. And for the first time, I saw things that just blew my mind, which I had no idea were subsets of jewelry or was even possible. And some of these things were heavily computer driven, at the time, or let's say technology driven. I left questioning how I was going to survive or to make it in the future as an artist or as a designer or even as a maker, and one of the drawbacks for me at the time was that I had no knowledge in computers. Um, Even though we lived on the student campus at the time, computers was not something that people had the luxury of having in their homes or even in the school. My uncle, when he came back from Canada, actually he was gifted a computer, but we were not allowed to touch it. Every weekend we power it up, we wipe it down, and then we turn it off. That was, that was extended, you know. So it felt almost like we had an atomic bomb, in the house, and we had to be very, very careful how we dealt with it. So I knew that was a drawback. And what I had to do very quickly when I came to the US was, aside from attending Maine College of Arts, I had to um, I had to take stock of myself, you know, to figure out what I did not know and how I can use my time here to capitalize and to grow as a person. And there were two things that was at stake. One of them was, how do you become innovative? And the second part was, how do I learn how to use computers? And with computers, I figured the best way for me to learn is actually to learn how to build and troubleshoot them, you know, because in my mind, if I can build a computer, then I should not be afraid of it. I should be able to use it. I should be able to manipulate it any way I want, which I think will be much better. It will serve me better as a person, as a designer, than learning how to use it, you know. On the innovative part, I leave that to God. Yes. So I had to do my part technically and dwell on the grace of God to be able to have the innovative aspect of it to bring things to life.
And so, and I guess like the really interesting part of your story is you actually you're really juggling two responsibilities because you still have a day job and then you have your night job, I guess, in your whatever spare time you have designing the jewelry. So in your day job, what is that again?
So my day job, I work for the Maine Turnpike Authority. I'm one of three PC support specialists. We take care of setting up systems, deploying them, and when they break down, we have to find ways to fix it. I'm also in charge of deploying our antivirus software, and but it's something that we it's a shared job between myself and my other two colleagues. So that's what I do during the day.
Okay. So it must make for very long days. So when do you fit in all of your designing and your making of the jewelry?
Well, I sleep less. I usually, yeah, I sleep less, but I usually that's what I do when I get off work
Mhm.
and
And
I'm not
on
on the road.
weekends as well, I imagine.
Yeah,
Okay. Wow, that makes for some long days. You look like you're holding up some very well for somebody who doesn't get a lot of sleep.
it's all by the grace of God.
so so when did you come upon the idea of using? Did I say the word right? The Adinkra? Adinkra?
Yes, yeah.
When did you come upon using those as the basis for your jewelry design?
Well, Adinkra symbols have always been with us. Growing up, it's everywhere. We have them, especially in fabric, in some architecture. Some people use it for their graphic logos, for their businesses. But we grew up with them. You know, there are a few of them that we see constantly, and that is the only God symbol, GME symbol. It's practically everywhere. Um, and that is what we use even in the jewelry industry in Ghana. A lot of people will have their own definition or rendition of the symbol, but they try to stay within that confinement. Um, in Florence, there's a place called Ponte Vecchio, and on Ponte Vecchio you have a lot of jewelry shops. I don't know if it's still the same today, but at the time there were a lot of jewelry shops all on that bridge. And I happened to be walking around one beautiful Saturday, and then I decided, since I'm here to study jewelry making and jewelry design, I might as well check out why this place is so unique, right? And every jewelry shop I entered had their own version of the heart symbol. And the heart symbol in Ghana means patience and tolerance, right? Um, and when I saw that, it started, it ignited some sort of light, because I think up until that point, I did not really understand the value of design or the meaning of design. I felt like design was just, me taking your idea and just recreating that. And the fact that I can recreate your idea means that I'm a great designer. I'm a great maker. But it was actually um, digging deeper, to find some sort of meaning to what you are designing. And it was apparent that even with some of my instructors who were jewelry designers, they all had a story. They all had a style, which is like their brand. That with you seeing the piece without even seeing their name, you can tell who designed it. You know, but at the same time, I did not have the technical know-how. But then it just hit me that if I'm only seeing the symbol of patience utilized that way, it means that I'm sitting on a pot of gold, So how cool will it be to actually take all these symbols over, let's say, if I'm not mistaken, over 100 symbols, right? And dial in my own voice. How cool is that going to be? That was what just went through my mind, but it was like a flash of light, boom, and then it went away. Because as much as I had that ambition, I didn't have what it took to get to that point. I had to learn. I had to go through the butterfly effect. I had to go through it. I had to. Oh, is it the butterfly or the caterpillar? I had to go through that effect of trying, learning, doing things I don't want to do, but at the end, it all becomes part of who I am or part of who I become. Yeah.
And when did you come out with your first, I guess, your first jewelry designs with the Adinkra symbol?
Um, Even after that, I was still, I think I was still in that world of just using the symbols as they were. Um, but then, as much as I knew that I wanted to design with the aid of computer or to manufacture with the aid of technology, I was keeping an eye. I was keeping track of what was going on in the technology world and what was going on in the design world. And around this time, I was working um, as a temp IT person for the Turnpike, and I was working as a contract jeweler for Zales, the diamond store. But then I was keeping track because the software was great, but the hardware could not support the software. And those are the times when you create a design, it's like in the middle of the design, the computer will just crash because of the permutations, or when you're rendering, you need to cluster multiple systems to get a rendering done. But then there was a time around 2005, 2006 where I think Intel introduced what they call hyper-threading, you know, and that was what actually changed the dynamism of what computers could become when in the technology world, sorry, in the design world. So around that time was when I decided to go back to school. I applied to RIT, Rotterdam Institute of Technology, to go back in there for my master's with a primary focus of computer aided design and manufacturing. You know, um, when I got there were a few challenges because I did not study industrial design for my undergrad. So I had to catch up, you know. I had to catch up with their style of sketching. I had to catch up with understanding the technology enough to be able to utilize the software to even create 3D designs. It was tough. It wasn't easy, but I held my own. Um, what also gave me some sort of confidence was that one day we were having a critique, and out of nowhere, my professor or our professor paused for a second. And then he said, I saw your work. So, what do you mean you saw my work? So, I saw your work in the jewelry making department at RIT in their master's department because there was a ring that I made um, that was featured by SNAG, Society of North American Goldsmith. And it's on one of their posters, which happened to be in the master's lab of the jewelry department at RIT. And I thought that was very impressive. I mean, that really gave me that kind of, yeah, you can do it, that motivation that I needed. And then I made friends with kids who were into graphic design. So that was when I started understanding the importance of typography, which is what I was taught when I was at Maine College of Arts. I started understanding the value of them because when you are a designer, you need to know how to communicate. You need to know how to present your work, and typography helps you to do that. Because typography is another form of 3D design, even though it's on 2D form, because you're using the font sizes to communicate how you want people to navigate through your storytelling. And this is all something that I had to learn at the time. And getting to the end of the program, my thesis was all about, once again, it was all about computer aided design and manufacturing. I wanted to create, there was a company called Virtue at the time. I don't know if they're still in existence, but they were making cell phones for like $50,000 because they will buy like the normal BlackBerry, and then they will CNC the parts in like silver or gold, and then they'll change the buttons and use the screen. Like the screen was a sapphire screen, the buttons were made out of ruby, so it made it very expensive. And that was what I really wanted. I was like, wow, I want to go into that kind of world. And then we went on a school trip. We visited a museum in New York, the Cooper Hewitt Center, I think. And at the time, the show was about designing for the 90% of the world population. And that was when there was another shift, you know. So I was surprised that most of these luxury brands were only designing to target 10% of the world population, because 90% of the world population is believed to live in poverty, you know. So that was a very big surprise for me. And I left the show with my class thinking how I could use design as a tool to solve a problem. Um, so I started thinking of growing up in Ghana, what were some of the problems that I wish I could have solved? I wish I had a magic wand, that I could have solved. And one of them was about plastic pollution. The other one was about road accidents, which is usually caused by bad car tires. And then the third one was water. So I decided to go with water. But what is interesting about the water project was that I had an opportunity to work with another company called B9 Plastic, um, based in Rochester, New York. And in the process of, collaborating with them, I had an opportunity to go to Ghana to do a few presentations of the UV unit that we were working on, and it amazed. It was amazing to me that um, and prior to that, actually, I did a presentation for UNICEF, and before I left, the gentleman was like, "Well, your project that you're working on is really really good, but good luck if the people in the villages are going to gravitate towards it because they're going to tell you their grandfather died at the age of 90 drinking the same water, so they don't see the importance of it. But I was like, okay. So I went on, did my test anyway. I did a lot of field studies. And in the process, I realized even though the unit at the time was projected for about $200, people were not really, um, they were not too crazy about wanting to buy. So then the jewelry making part of my life kicked in again. So then at this time I was like, how do I use how do I create jewelry using the symbols? Because that's what my people are familiar with, right? So the first level of innovation in my way or in my thinking was using recyclable plastic, which is polycarbonate, to create earrings, and that I have on my website. It's under Emekor. Emekor means clean, so it's like clean. Something is clean, clean. So the idea was to make this plastic earrings and then sell them, and 70% of that proceeds goes back into donating the UV unit to families that are interested in health.
Wow, what a great
Um,
idea. Wow.
Yes. So then I picked certain colors. Like I picked the primary colors. Um, but the colors that I was also picking to me were of some value to the way we dress back in Ghana. Um, when somebody below the age of 75 passes, like dies, um, we usually wear red and black. Red meaning we're angry the person is gone, and black meaning we're sad, you know. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna have red and black because Adinkra symbols, Adinkra means parting ways or saying goodbye. And back in the day, or the history of the symbols was based on the idea of when a family member dies, based on your connection with that person, you pick a symbol, right? And you that's what you print on your fabric, and you make clothing out of it to attend the person's funeral. It is still done today. It's no longer about the relationship between the person, but it's about the family picking a symbol that embodies the person who passed on. And usually family and friends who attended the funeral will all buy or purchase the same type of cloth, to attend the funeral. So black and red became um, color of choice. Then the other storyline
Is that
is
why your sweatshirt is black and red?
no, with this one here, I made drinking glasses, right, using the symbols, but I didn't want somebody to come and tell me, well, I want strength in green or strength in yellow. So once again, by the grace of God, I was thinking about the process. I was thinking about how to make it happen, and somehow that light, the ancestors whispered into my ear and said, "Why don't you color coordinate the colors according to the meaning of the symbols?" And strength and bravery are red. So the color for strength and bravery is red, and so in my drinking glasses I have two variations of red. I didn't want to have the same color, So that is why it is red. Um, So to go back to the earring, so then when somebody gives birth, um, we don't do baby showers, but we do outdooring. And outdooring is when the child is named after 7 days of the child's birth, and we usually wear black and white. When somebody who is over 80 years or 90 dies, people don't cry as much as when the person is below 75. So they wear black and white, because the person has lived a good life. And then, the yellow, greens, and the blues is just like party colors. Yeah. So that's how it all started.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now do you have your own design, you have your own place where you design the jewelry and also where you sell them, or do you sell them, or do other merchants sell your wear and you're just making it?
Yeah, I have a website
Hmm.
where I sell my merchandise,
Hmm.
but I also have a studio space in Westbrook,
Okay.
Maine.
Okay. How far is Westbrook, Maine from Portland?
It's about give or take 8 to 10 minutes drive,
Okay.
depending
All
on
right.
traffic. Yeah,
Okay, forgive my my lacking knowledge of the main geography.
it's fine.
So then, can you walk me through, like, I guess like for my bracelet, can you walk me through how this came to being?
Yeah, so it's also anyway, it's an interesting story. So I was visiting a cousin of mine in London, and um, I saw fresh Maine lobsters somewhere around the Piccadilly Square, and I was like, "Did I just see this? Like, did it just say fresh Maine lobsters?" And yeah, it was fresh Maine lobsters. So yeah, so I was like, "Oh, okay." But anyway, so when I came back, I started questioning, um, how do I sell? Like, how do I tell my story? Do you understand? How do I make, because these are symbols that are not unique to America. So how do I introduce it in America? How do I introduce it to the people in Maine? How do I even start that conversation? You know? So part of my deal was, okay, in order for me to start that conversation, I need to speak the language that they already know how to speak, which is introduce them to the symbols that they're already familiar with. So then I had to do a study on what those symbols are in Maine. And I know people come to Maine because of the lighthouses, people come to Maine because of deer hunting, moose hunting. Um, they have black bear, they have the chickadee, pine cones. Now, this may not be unique to just Maine. I mean, it's unique to New England, but that was the story that I was creating in my head. So I decided to create. I said, if Maine was my world, and I'm creating that world with symbols, how would that look like? So I took all the main symbols that I just mentioned, and I put them in like a dome, you know, in like a dome structure, a dome form. I don't know if you can see this. See?
Hmm. Yep.
So that's what I did, and then I turned it into uh, a tote bag. But the unique thing about it is when I was creating that dome, some of the symbols, because I had to move them, some of them were touching. And once I finished that, I was like, I can take that same idea and apply it to my symbols, right? So when I was creating the same idea with the symbols, they were scattered. But once again, the experience from Maine College of Arts, as well as experience in typography from RIT, helped me to start looking at it with a critical eye, you know, because when they are separated in the dome, they look like they don't belong. So then I started thinking, okay, what if I start creating, like, what if I start moving them together to create that kind of pattern? How would they look like? And then immediately something came out of it. A language came out of it. A story came out of it. And what actually made it unique to me was that I have a friend who actually studied the symbols at the university in Ghana. So I took the only God symbol, and after creating the pattern, I sent it to her and I said, "Hey, check this out. What do you think?" She's like, "Oh, this is so beautiful." And I was like, "Do you know what it is?" It's like, "No, but it's a very beautiful pattern." And I was like, "Yes, I guess I'm onto something here." And that is the point, you know. We as individuals have stories. Our stories are like patterns. We decide to share that story whenever we want or if we don't want to. And in most cases, this with all our patterns, with all our stories, when people look at us from the outside, all they see is that you are handsome. All they see is that you are sad. All they see is that you are beautiful, right? But not until you decide to tell them your story, they have no idea what is going on with you. And that is where I felt like creating the patterns with a symbol became unique and solidified in my world, right? So I've had, I always tell this story. There was a lady who bought one of my goblets, and she said she doesn't wear jewelry. And I was like, I just started making these goblets. And the moment she saw hope, she just took it from me. And when I asked her why, she's like, I just lost my husband about a month ago. And I told her, well, the symbol hope means that God is in the heavens listening to our prayers. And she started crying. So it's almost like we want to have something that is not in our face, which is abstract, but it's personal to us. And that is where I see the uniqueness of what I create.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Um, and yeah, and for me, that's what I liked about it was that the bracelet has meaning, but like you said, it's kind of it's understated and it is personal to me. But for me, it's actually where it comes from. Maine was meant something because I'd never been. My wife and I'd never been to Maine until this year. So it was like 51 years before I'd ever gotten to Maine, and I've lived most of my life in New York.
Yeah,
So part of my journey, or in the last year or two, has been to learn more about this country. So the origin of the bracelet means something, and I think your story kind of means something too, because it's a very improbable story, but I think the United States is filled with improbable stories. Um,
true.
so, um, so you've talked about technology being obviously an essential part of what you're doing. So, do you then design the bracelet with some kind of program, and then does it get like printed out someplace, or where does technology come into play as far as in the manufacturing of your jewelry?
So I still use the same ideas of traditional design. You know, there is nothing faster than a hand sketch. you know, but the hand sketch is an extension of what we are thinking in our minds. So it gives you a quick preview of what it's about to be. And that is what I enjoy. I enjoy that process. Now, once that is done, uh, I, I always tell people a writer, right? Somebody who writes stories cannot imagine a writer is supposed to write 1,000 books by hand. The same story. You write it the first time, you just copy it, and you keep copying. It will be daunting, right? But then we use computers to solve that problem. And that's the same thing I'm doing. So once that hand sketch is done, now I'm using computers, using various applications to go through the process of making it work, you know. and also bring it to the point where I'll be able to start up the production and then finish by hand. Um, I think there was a story about a few years ago, maybe yeah, a few years ago when Elon Musk was trying to um, turn his one of his Tesla factories into all robotics, and then he quickly realized that no, it's not possible. We need to find ways to like work hand in hand because there are certain things that you can do well with technology, and there are certain things that you can do better by hand. And the same is true with what I do. There um, when I was, I mean, when I'm looking at costs, I'm looking at reducing costs. I'm also looking at trying to create something unique that somehow has value and has a story. And by that value and story, you don't just throw it away because you've created an emotional connection with the piece, right? And by creating that emotional connection, even when you're sharing that story with somebody else, or when you are passing on that object to a next person, that story is transferred, all right, for them to also carry it on. The touch is transferred. And that is what I see as the uniqueness of what I create. So it's a balance. I try to find a balance of what I can use technology to do and what I can use the hand to do.
Hmm. And so then are I guess are the bracelets actually like made in your studio, or do they get made someplace else and then come back for you to like add finishing touches?
No, it's made in my studio. So no, actually, no. The first batch of it, which is the acid etching, is made somewhere else. It's made in Boston. Uh, because I want to live a little bit longer. And the process is using acid. It's just normal etching, you know. And I don't know, like I think in my jewelry shop, if I'm supposed to deal with all this type of chemicals, it will require some sort of government. I mean, imagine I'm like buying gallons of hydrochloric acid. Of course, they're going to ask me, what are you doing? What are you doing with it? So, or sulfuric acid, So to cut down on that headache, and also to cut down on the idea of of not having to deal with those chemicals, I let somebody else do it.
Hmm.
And then once the pieces come back, I take them off the pieces. Then I do my part. Yeah.
Okay, and then can I? So for your designing, are you making things for with an eye towards like women or men, and does how does that change your aesthetic?
I think initially I was thinking more of what to design for women. And there's a reason why. There is a shop called, I don't know if it's still, I think it's still there. It's called Express. When Express opened at the mall, they had this huge space, and it was divided 50-50. Half of it was for men, the other half was for women. Then a couple of years later, they took half of that was for men and it became for women. And then now you go there and they just have like a 10 by 10. I mean, I'm just exaggerating, but they have an
Yeah,
extremely small space
yeah.
for men's products. And that should tell you something. So with that in mind, I think um, most of my design initially was more towards women. And then when I was understanding, or when I was having a better understanding of what I was doing, I started creating products for men as well, but also trying to keep that unisex. So like the cuff you have on can be worn by men and women. So in the case of women, they probably like to stack it. They like to have multiple symbols or multiple like different colors, different sizes, all like stacked together, which turns out to be very beautiful. And then the apparel is the same thing. Apparel is also more for men and women. And then I have drinking glasses, which can be used by both sexes. So yeah, it is. I'm learning. I'm learning, and I'm refining as I progress with my experimentation.
Yeah. I see that you also make bags. Is that what I see behind you?
Yes, yeah, tote bags. Yeah, using
Okay.
the symbols. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So, do you ship all over? Like, how much of your work, how much of what you sell is through your website versus like sold like at the I guess the shops within Maine or maybe other places where you sell?
Um, I think with everything, we always need to find a good foundation, and the foundation is not just about where you can sell, but it's about understanding what you're making and the impact that it's having in people's lives. So for a long time, I started very small, like I'll do just one show a year. And that show was the Portland Festival. That was how I started selling stuff. Um, and then after I think 3 years, I started doing like you meet other artists and they'll tell you, oh, why don't you try this show? Oh, you do very well. So then I'll try it. And then it went from one to like two. Um, and that was what I was doing. I wasn't really focusing much on website because the the initial problem for me was that people don't know about the symbols. So I'm introducing something in their culture where they have no connection to. And I didn't know how to translate that online. I didn't know how to translate that to make it make sense to somebody online. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. No,
I didn't know how
understood.
to do that. So, and I felt like whenever I have that interaction with a person, the likelihood of them buying is 95%. But because I don't have that connection online, there's no sale. You see. So it became, I don't want to say problematic, but it became very difficult for me to find ways to make that work to my advantage. So for a very long time, I wasn't focusing on online business. I was just focusing on one to one doing shows. And then it was during COVID that a lot of this changed. So during COVID, and then there was a little bit of awareness of what about all these other Black businesses that are also capable, who are not being featured, and I think you work hard, but it's also surprising that you meet people in your community and then they'll be like, oh, I didn't know you made that. Oh, really? You made that? You can make that? So it was a little bit weird, but it's part of life. So that actually helped, and I was able to speed up the process by moving or switching platforms from WordPress to Shopify. And then And then by having, I was also blessed to have some coverage, in the news media. I remember during COVID, I was featured in the Boston Globe with my drinking glasses. Um, Portland Press Herald did a couple of stories on me. I did is the American Journal. They also did a story because I was working with some of the kids in the middle school, playing around with symbols, trying to come up with different shapes, or objects that we plan on creating a sculpture for them in the school in the near future. So it started, everything starts with one step.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is what I keep doing. And then I had an opportunity to do the bus shelter, the bus stop, which then won the best bus stop in the US. And even after that, like a lot of people don't know about it. Some people know, but most people don't know about it. And then you ask yourself, okay, so you won that. How do you capitalize on that? I don't know. How do you by winning the best bus stop in the US, how do you utilize that for people to know that you are also here, you know, adding to the fabric of Maine or adding to the fabric of the US? How do you make that happen? So it's all learning process. And then it's learning process, but it's also taking a step at a time. And then through that process, I got an opportunity to be featured again recently in the Yankee magazine, you know. So it's been steady, and just like the caterpillar effect, if it has all happened all together at one time, I'll probably crash. But these little steps, these little advancements is helping me to refine my work, to better understand what I'm doing, to better understand how my work is having impact on people, how people are connecting with my work, how I am even seeing my own work, and how I also want to grow to become a better person, a better designer, by not only making small objects, but advancing to larger objects, like looking at this object and be like, okay, what if this was like the size of a skyscraper? How would that look like? So yeah, I know the question was about website, but then, or how I introduce my work, but I think there is something to be said about the gradual growth. Sometimes I wish I was everywhere in the US. I also know that it comes with time.
Yeah. Well, are you familiar with the Steve Jobs story at all?
I listened to a lot of Steve Jobs story, but I'm curious to hear which part of the story you want to talk about.
Well, what you're talking about, and everything that you've done reminds me of the bit about how he, dropped out of college and audited classes, and one of the classes he audited was calligraphy, and
Yeah,
that was just kind of a little experience that kind of stayed in the back of his head, and then 10, 20 years later, when he's working on the next Macintosh, he's the one who comes up with the idea of offering users different fonts, and that is what made Macintosh so different than all the other computers that were out there. So you're kind of talking about that same idea of almost kind of like being patient and accumulating experiences, and almost like doing kind of like mental like mind games, and ruminating, and thinking and pondering and being patient with the pieces as they come together.
yeah. It's interesting you said that because I think that I have a little card that I include to my packages, and I think there's somewhere that I talk about um, everything that I'm doing today is based off connections from my past. So yeah, connecting the dots, connecting the experiences. to help me move forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds like you've got a lot more ahead, and I know that we've got a lot of bus stops here in New York City that could use your touch, and a lot of other things as well.
You know the interesting thing about that. Um, when I think it's very painful when you know what you're capable of, but the people that sometimes you connect to or you connect with are looking at, oh, you don't have an engineering degree, you know? I'm like, yeah, I don't have an engineering degree, but do you know what I'm capable of doing? You know? So sometimes you're not given that opportunity because you're not wearing that title. And I said, I don't have engineering degree, but I did industrial design. I did jewelry making. I am utilizing half of what engineers or other designers will use, which is digital prefabrication. You know, so it is. It's painful. Um, so, for example, yeah, like you're talking about the bus shelter, right? Um, it would have been great to have that opportunity, but it's also one of those things that you look at. Oh, but he's just an artist, you know. But the question is, what did I have to think about to get to that point? I am looking at a structure that already exists, and I'm trying to add my design to it, making the minimum disturbance to the existing structure. How is that not engineering?
Yeah,
How is that not part of architecture?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, so I think that is what sometimes it makes me sad that I have to always prove myself. Let me tell you a story. There was a lady who was I was doing a show in Boston. Um, she came. She wanted to buy an earring, and I told her, "Yeah, I'm the designer. I'm the maker." And she almost doesn't. It's almost like she doesn't believe that I'm capable of doing that. And I had to explain to her that yes, I was born in Ghana. Yes, I went to high school in Ghana. Yes, I did an apprenticeship in Ghana. Yes, I went to Italy to learn Italian language, to take classes or to school in Italy to study jewelry design, jewelry making, stone setting, come to America, have a degree, right? Study computers, go back to RIT to take another program over there. It's like I had to read all my credential just to make a sale. And when she left, I felt void. I felt void and I felt sorry for myself. That why? Why do I have to go to that extent of telling you what I'm capable of doing instead of just accepting that yes, he can do it?
yeah.
It's sad.
Well, it sounds to me like you're on the cutting edge of like first year designs, I guess obviously your it sounds like your background like threw her for a loop as far as what she'd expect. But it's funny that we're talking about this because I was talking to another guest, and this guest was a Lego artist, right? And he had problems where he lived in San Diego, and he said like in New York they kind of just accepted that Lego could be art, but in San Diego they just like they couldn't comprehend the idea of somebody using Lego for art.
Yeah,
And I said to him actually kind of similar to what I think is like for different reasons, like you guys are both like on the cutting edge of doing something where people just can't process it.
yeah,
Um, And like I guess the challenge is because you're on the cutting edge, you're the one that has to explain all the stuff that at someday won't need to be explained, but you're that person. And for me, like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to promote travel within the United States. Like the podcast is one part of this project, but what I want is to get high schoolers in our country to take trips within our country, because there's a lot of trips for kids to go overseas, which is great. But I think after the last few years in our country, I think we need to spend more time trying to understand our country, like Maine, like South Carolina, like every state, because it's a huge country. And when I'm talking to people, a lot of what I feel like I'm talking about is very basic things, like the very basic idea of choosing to maybe travel to South Carolina instead of Paris
Yeah.
seems like an incomprehensible kind of decision. So you're kind of spending a lot of time laying the foundations that hopefully will benefit other people. At least that's what I feel like I'm doing. And it sounds like that's what you're doing as well.
Yeah. No, you're right.
and
Yeah.
and it certainly sounds like, and it appears that you're doing an amazing job, and like such a with so much patience and grace, and with so much more to come. So I'm so glad that we stumbled upon your jewelry at that shop when we were going to dinner. I think we had like a half hour or something, and we were got to check out what you had. And I don't think they even had what I wanted, but I ended up ordering it like on the spot.
Online.
So I was like, I don't want to forget this, so I ordered it online. And it does mean a lot, because I do think like after the last few years in our country, and I think what you see in like social media is there's lots of reasons to be worried. There's lots of reasons to be depressed. There's lots of reasons
Yeah.
to be discouraged. But the more that I've been reaching out, the more that I am reminded that there's so many reasons for hope. And your bracelet is, for many different reasons, a tangible reminder of looking for the positive, looking for the hope, and creating your own hope. So I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And
So
thank you for your support as well.
yeah, no. And then I guess where, if anybody's interested, whoever is interested in looking for your for more of what you do, what's your website address?
It's my last name, which is akakpo.com, akakpo.com, or they can also find me on Instagram, Akakpo and Co. The Co is CO, just like Tiffany and Co. It's a play on words, yeah. So Akakpo and AND
But
Co.
your stuff's more interesting than Tiffany's.
Well, they also have their own, their own story, and I I keep pushing. I keep hoping. I mean, I think what I do is very diverse. You know, it's very diverse. And yes, even though I started off as making jewelry, I feel like I've been able to translate that same idea into multiple products, which then become unique to any individual. From the water products or the tumblers to apparel to bags, and now to like panels and some wall sculptures. It's just unique. I keep praying that um, I keep praying that I don't lose focus, and I keep praying that my ancestors, the angels, and God keep guiding me. To be able to bring whatever is planted in my head to life, so that people like you can find your own stories in them.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Um, Before I wrap up, I like to ask everybody, like, and I guess it seems appropriate since we were talking about hope. Can I ask you, like, what gives you hope at the end of the day?
What gives me hope at the end of the day? I think what gives me hope at the end of the day is that as individuals, we are planted here for a reason, and we are here to support each other. What I'm creating is helping people in ways that I don't even know. because they are finding their own definitions in their own stories and their own meaning in what I'm creating. And that is what I don't have control of. Me not having control of that is what gives me hope.
It's fascinating. That's a really fascinating insight into that. It's almost like the variability out there is what gives you inspiration and hope. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, imagine this. Let me imagine this story. Like just this summer, I was setting up at a show in Yarmouth, and the lady saw me and she ran towards me, said, "Oh my God, Ebenezer, 2019, before COVID, around Christmas time, I bought something from you. And just when I was leaving, you gave me a card because I make these cards. Let me see if I can actually find them. All right. Since we're talking about hope, I'll use hope. But she said I gave her a card, right? And I use the negative space of the symbols to create the cards. And then it says the word on the inside, right? So this is hope. And the color for hope is green. But when she bought the item, I gave her strength card. And she said, "You don't even know what that meant to me." Apparently, 2 days prior to her coming to the show, she has miscarried. But giving her that symbol, giving her that card of strength, has given her strength. And now she has a 2-year-old son, and she was pointing the son to me. What did I do? I didn't do anything. Do you understand what I mean? I did not do anything. All I did was give her the card, but she completed the story.
That's, and in some respects, it's like your ancestors have been guiding you, and your ancestors kind of gave those symbols, and it ends up kind of connecting to her in unexpected ways. That's amazing.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and it's happening for me too.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you, all right, Ebenezer. Thank you so very much for connecting and for having this conversation. It's been really wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope I did okay.
Yeah, you're wonderful. So, all right. So, thank you, and thank you to our listeners. May you go out and explore our country with compassion, respect, curiosity, and humility. All right, take care.
Bye.